I want you to imagine something. Imagine you are sitting in a restaurant. Expensive one. The kind with cloth napkins and candles on every table. Across from you sits your best friend of 15 years. You have been through everything together. College, heartbreaks, funerals, weddings. You have shown up for this person. Every single time. Now imagine. You have just told them you lost your job. Your savings are gone. You might lose your apartment next month. And this person, this best friend of 15 years, looks at you across that candlelit table and says, I would help, but honestly I have my own things going on right now. Then picks up the menu and orders the salmon. Now imagine that you were never actually broke, that you had planned this moment, that hidden in your bag is a notebook, and in that notebook is every name, every excuse, every person who disappeared, and every person who stayed. My name is James Calloway. 2 years ago, I was worth $4.2 million. I told everyone I had lost everything. And what happened next? Changed the way I understand human beings forever. This is the full story. Every name, every moment, every detail. Stay until the end, because the final reveal is not what anyone expected, including me. Before I explain the experiment, you need to understand who I was before it, because context matters. I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio. Father was an engineer. Mother was a school librarian. We were not wealthy. We were not poor. We were comfortable in the way that teaches you that money requires work, but never teaches you what money does to the people around you. I moved to Chicago at 22 with a business degree and $40 more than I needed for first month's rent. I started as a junior analyst at a financial consulting firm. I was good at my job. Not brilliant, not lucky, just relentlessly consistent. I showed up early. I stayed late. I solved problems that other people found inconvenient. And by 31, I had built a portfolio of private investments that had performed extraordinarily well. By 34, my net worth crossed $4 million. I moved into a penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast neighborhood. Nice car, nice suits, nice everything. And with the nice everything came the people. My best friend Marcus, we had been friends since college. Funny, charming, the kind of man who made every room louder and better. We spoke every day. My girlfriend of 3 years, Vanessa. Beautiful, sophisticated, passionate about art and travel. We had talked about moving in together. My cousin Derek, the family favorite, always at every gathering, always laughing loudest, always the first to suggest somewhere expensive when he knew I was paying. My friend group, 6 people I had met over the years. Ryan, Priya, Chris, Melissa, Jada and Tom. We had a group chat called the Inner Circle. Weekly dinners. Vacations together. The works. And then there was my family. My parents, retired, wonderful, completely genuine. My sister Rachel, older by 3 years, practical, loving, a kindergarten teacher with 2 kids and a modest house. And my uncle Gerald, my father's brother, who had borrowed $40,000 from me 2 years earlier for a business venture he said was a sure thing, and had paid back exactly 0 of it. On the surface, my life looked extraordinary, but something had been bothering me, quietly, for a long time. It started with small things. Marcus only called when he needed something or when we were doing something expensive. Vanessa's mood shifted noticeably after I mentioned, once, that I was thinking of scaling back spending. Derek appeared at every expensive occasion and vanished for every ordinary one. And Uncle Gerald, who owed me $40,000, had the audacity to post vacation photos from Cancun and never once mention the loan. I started asking myself a question, a dangerous question. If I lost everything tomorrow, who would still be here? And I couldn't answer it, which meant I needed to find out. The idea came to me on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting alone in my penthouse, for $1 million in assets, and I felt completely alone. Not lonely, alone. There is a difference. Lonely is wanting company. Alone is realizing that the company you have may not actually know you at all. I pulled out a legal pad, and I started writing the rules of the experiment. Rule 1, it had to be believable. Not a vague hint that things were tight. A complete, verifiable collapse. Rule 2, I would tell no one the truth. Not Marcus. Not Vanessa. Not Derek. The only exceptions, my parents and my sister Rachel. Because I refused to put my parents through that kind of fear. And because Rachel, I already knew where she stood. Rule 3, I would document everything. Every conversation, every text, every excuse, every person who disappeared, every person who stayed. Rule 4, the experiment would last exactly 2 years. Long enough to see real patterns. Short enough that I wouldn't lose my mind. Rule 5, at the end of 2 years, the reveal would be real, complete, documented, and the consequences would be permanent. I spent 3 weeks planning the logistics. I moved my actual assets into a trust managed by my attorney, David Park, the only other person who knew the truth. I gave up the penthouse, moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in a significantly less impressive neighborhood, sold the car, bought a used Honda Civic with 200,000 miles, updated my wardrobe to consist entirely of items that cost under $30, created a paper trail of a financial collapse, a bad investment, a failed business, losses that wiped out everything, completely fictional, completely convincing. And then, on a Saturday morning in March, I sent a single message to the group chat. Hey everyone, I have some difficult news I need to share. Can we all meet this week? It's important. The responses came quickly. Marcus, of course man. Everything okay? Priya, we're here. Name the time. Ryan, always. What's going on? Chris, definitely. Let me know. Vanessa called immediately. James, what happened? Tell me right now. I'll explain when we're all together. James, you're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry. Saturday, I sat back and waited. The next 2 years were the most educational of my entire life. We met at a casual restaurant. My choice. Gone were the expensive places. That itself, I noticed, made 2 people arrive looking slightly confused. I sat down, looked around the table. Marcus, Vanessa, Ryan, Priya, Chris, Melissa, Jada, Tom. 8 people who called themselves my closest friends. I took a breath, and I told them. A bad investment. A worse advisor. Margin calls I couldn't cover. $4 million gone in 6 months. The penthouse surrendered. The car sold. My savings gone. I was starting over. Completely. The table was silent. And then the reactions came. And I wrote every single one of them in my notebook that night. Marcus leaned back and let out a long breath. Man, that's heavy. I'm really sorry. Then he changed the subject to a basketball game. Vanessa was quiet the entire meal. She held my hand across the table, but her eyes were somewhere else entirely. Ryan said all the right things. Whatever you need. Seriously. Anything. But his body language said something different. He was leaning away, arms crossed, already processing an exit. Priya, who I had always believed was the most genuine person in that group, looked at me with real eyes. James, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? How are you sleeping? Are you eating? She was asking about me, not my money. I noted that. Tom made a joke to break the tension. It wasn't a good joke, but I noted that he tried. Melissa and Jada exchanged a look across the table. A micro-expression, so fast most people would have missed it. I didn't miss it. I wrote it down that night. Melissa and Jada look exchanged at announcement. Duration 1.5 seconds. Meaning, this changes things. After dinner, Vanessa and I walked to her car. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, So what's the plan? Like what are you going to do? Start over. Find work. Rebuild. More silence. How long do you think that takes? Not, are you okay? Not, we'll get through this. How long does that take? I looked at her profile in the streetlight, and I felt something go very still inside me. I don't know, I said. Could be years. She nodded slowly and drove home. The experiment had been running for 48 hours, and I was already learning things I couldn't unlearn. Month 1, the group chat went quiet. Not immediately. Gradually. The way heat leaves a room. You don't notice it happening. Until suddenly you're cold. Ryan stopped responding to direct messages. Not blocked. Just slow. Then slower. Then not at all. Melissa and Jada's exit was cleaner. They cited being busy, which people always do. But I had known these women for 6 years. I knew the difference between busy and choosing. Tom tried, genuinely tried. He invited me to things twice in the first month, but the things he invited me to were expensive, and when I said I couldn't afford it, he said he'd cover me. Once. The second time, the invitation didn't come. Not because Tom was cruel, but because he had built his social life around a shared financial bracket. And when I stepped out of that bracket, he didn't know how to recalibrate. I noted this with less judgment than the others. Tom was not malicious. He was just limited. Marcus was the one that surprised me most. Because Marcus didn't disappear. He stayed present, texted regularly, called sometimes, but the nature of the calls changed. Before, we talked about everything. Ideas, memories, jokes, fears. After, he mostly called when he wanted advice. He was starting a business. He had questions about investments. He had questions about financial strategy. He was calling the version of me, he remembered, the wealthy advisor, and getting frustrated, slowly, that I wasn't that person anymore. By month 3, the calls became monthly. By month 5, the calls stopped. And then there was Vanessa. Our relationship lasted 4 more months after the announcement. The ending was not dramatic. That almost made it worse. She simply became less present, less warm, less future-focused. The conversations about moving in together stopped completely. And one Sunday afternoon, she sat across from me in my small apartment, looked around at the modest furniture and the second-hand everything, and said, "James, I think we want different things." "What things?" Long pause. I had a vision of where we were going, and I think that vision has changed. The vision. She had a vision, and the vision required a certain tax bracket. I nodded. I understand. She left. I sat in my second-hand chair and wrote her name in the notebook, not with anger, with clarity. She had not been cruel. She had simply been honest, in the only way she knew how, by leaving. By month 6 of the experiment, from a social circle of 8 close friends, 3 remained in any meaningful contact. Priya, Tom occasionally, and one person I hadn't expected, Chris. Quiet, unassuming Chris, who I had always considered a peripheral friend, showed up at my apartment one Saturday with groceries. "I figured you probably weren't eating great," he said simply. "I make a pretty good pasta." He came in, made dinner. We talked for 4 hours, and he came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. I added his name to a different section of the notebook, the section I had titled, "The Real Ones." I had expected my friends to be the most revealing part of this experiment. I was wrong. It was my family. My parents. I had told the truth. My father sat quietly while I explained the experiment. Then he said, "Son, you know your mother, and I don't have much, but whatever we have is yours if you need it." My mother cried, not because she thought I was broke. She already knew I wasn't. She cried because she understood why I needed to do this. "You've been lonely in that success," she said. "Yeah," I said. "I think I have." She held my face in her hands the way mothers do. "Whatever you find out, we're here. Whatever it looks like." I drove home that night with something I hadn't felt in years. Unconditional. My sister Rachel called me the night of the announcement. "Okay, so I know this is real for everyone else, but you told me the truth, so how are you actually doing?" "I'm okay. It's strange. Do you need anything?" "Money. I don't have much, but..." "Ratch. I'm fine. I promise." "Okay. But call me. Seriously. Every week." She called me. Every week. Not to check on the experiment. To check on me. To ask about my sleep. My mood. What I was eating. She sent care packages to my modest apartment. Homemade cookies. A book she thought I'd like. A ridiculous card that made me laugh. She had 2 kids, a teacher's salary and a mortgage, and she sent her broke brother care packages, because that is who Rachel has always been. Then there was Uncle Gerald. Gerald, who owed me $40,000. Gerald, who had posted Cancun vacation photos. I called him 1 month into the experiment, explained my situation. The line was quiet. Then, "Oh, James, that's terrible. You know times are tough all around. I've been meaning to talk to you about the loan, actually. I just need a little more time." "Gerald, I'm broke. I'm not calling about the loan. I just needed family." Long pause. "Right. Of course. Well, if there's anything I can do. There wasn't. He made that clear. By never calling again, I removed him from the Christmas card list in my head. And then, Derek. My cousin Derek, who appeared at every expensive occasion. Derek called me 2 days after the announcement. I thought, maybe I had misjudged him. James, I heard what happened. That's rough, man. Yeah, starting over. Listen, I actually wanted to ask you something. Sure. I'm doing this investment opportunity. It's a ground floor thing. Really solid. I need about $15,000 to get in, and I was wondering. I sat back. He was calling his broke cousin to ask for $15,000. Derek, I just told you I lost everything. Right, but you must have something saved. Even $5,000 would. I hung up, wrote his name in the notebook, in pen, underlined twice. By the end of year 1, the picture was very clear. Gone, completely and permanently. Vanessa, Marcus, Ryan, Melissa, Jada, Uncle Gerald, Derek. 7 people who had occupied significant space in my life, revealed, under mild financial pressure, to have been there for the lifestyle. Not for me. Present, meaningfully and consistently. My parents, Rachel, Chris, Priya, for people. Out of everyone. 4. And then in month 14, something happened that I had not planned for. I met someone. Her name was Nina. She worked at the small coffee shop near my modest apartment. She was studying for her nursing exam on her breaks. We started talking about books. She had one on the counter I had read. She had no idea who I was. No idea about the penthouse or the portfolio or any of it. She knew James Calloway, who drove a Honda with 200,000 miles, and ate at modest restaurants, and was unfailingly kind to every person who served him food, because that is who I had always been. When the money was irrelevant, we went for coffee, then dinner, then long walks. She was direct, funny, completely unimpressed by things that didn't matter. On our 3rd date, she told me, I don't have a lot of money. I want to be upfront about that. I work hard and I'm building something, but I'm not, fancy. I looked at her. I'm not fancy either, I said. She laughed. Good. Fancy is exhausting. I went home that night and sat for a long time with a feeling I hadn't had in years. The feeling of being known, actually known, by someone who had nothing to gain. I opened the notebook and wrote her name, but not in the section I had used for everyone else. I wrote it on a blank page at the back and drew a small star next to it, because some people don't fit in any category you plan for. Year 2 was quieter than year 1. The exits had already happened. What remained was just living the experiment and watching what the people who stayed actually did with their consistency. Chris came every Saturday for almost the entire 2nd year. We built something real in those Saturday evenings. Conversations I had never had with Marcus, who was funnier, more charming, more present, but had never once asked me what I was afraid of. Chris asked me that on a Tuesday in November. We were walking along the lake. What are you actually afraid of? I thought about it, that I spent a decade building a life that looked impressive and forgot to build one that felt real. He nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I think a lot of people do that. We walked for another hour without talking, and it was one of the best hours of my life. Priya checked in every 2 weeks without fail. She never asked about money. She asked about me. She recommended therapy once, gently without pressure. Not because anything's wrong, just because you're going through a lot of change and it helps to have a space. I went. It helped. Rachel called every week, sent packages every month, and once, in month 19, she drove 4 hours from Cincinnati just to have lunch with me because she said I sounded tired on the phone. She drove 4 hours, had lunch with me, and drove 4 hours back. She had papers to grade that weekend. She graded them in the car. Nina and I became something real and steady. She still had no idea about the experiment or the money. I wrestled with that because I knew, eventually, both truths would need to come out, and I had no idea how she would react, whether she would feel deceived, whether this beautiful, honest thing we had built would survive the reveal of what I had been doing. That fear kept me up more nights than anything else in the 2 years, because I had started the experiment to find out who loved me, and somewhere in year 2, I had found someone I loved, and I was terrified of what the truth would do to it. Month 24. The experiment was over. I sat with David Park, my attorney, and went through the plan. First Nina, before anyone else, because she deserved the truth before the spectacle. I took her to the same coffee shop where we had met. We sat at the same corner table, and I told her everything. All of it. The net worth. The experiment. The 2 years. She listened without interrupting. Her face went through several things I couldn't fully read. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "So the whole time, you had money?" "Yes." "And you were testing people?" "Yes." Another long silence. "Were you testing me?" I looked at her directly. "No. I met you 14 months in. You were never part of the experiment. You were the thing I didn't plan for." She looked at her coffee cup. "I need to think." "I know." She left. I sat at that table for 2 hours, and on the third day, she called. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "When we met, you were kind to the barista who spilled your order. You tipped generously on a $12 coffee. You held the door for 7 people. I counted. You counted. I always counted, because I was raised to watch what people do when nothing is required of them." Pause. "The money doesn't change who you were when I met you." I exhaled. "But James, if we move forward, no more experiments. Real. Honest. Completely. Completely," I said. Second, the friends. I sent individual messages to Marcus, Ryan, Melissa, Jada, and Vanessa. Calm, factual, without anger. I told them the experiment was over, that I was not broke, that I had documented everything, and that I wished them well, but would not be continuing the relationships. Marcus called immediately. "James, come on, you can't be serious. It was 2 years, man. Life gets busy." "Marcus, you called me twice in 24 months. Once to wish me happy birthday. Once to ask about investment strategy. I know because I wrote it down." Silence. "I'm not angry. I'm just done." I hung up. Ryan sent a long apologetic text. I read it once. Wished him well. Did not respond further. Vanessa sent nothing, which was, somehow, the most honest thing she had ever communicated. Third, Uncle Gerald. I called him with David Park on the line. "Gerald, the $40,000 loan." I explained calmly that I was not broke, that the loan documentation was being formally actioned, that he had 30 days to arrange repayment before David would proceed legally. Gerald blustered, protested, used the word family 4 times in 90 seconds. I let him finish. "Gerald, you went to Cancun, while owing me $40,000. You have 30 days. I hung up. Gerald paid in 22 days. Fourth, the people who stayed. I called Chris first, told him the full truth. He was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. "Man, I knew something was weird. You were too calm for someone who lost everything. You stayed anyway." "Of course I stayed. You're my friend, James, not your bank account." I told him I wanted to invest in his design business, which he had been quietly building for 3 years on a shoestring. He tried to refuse. I didn't let him. Priya cried when I told her. Not from betrayal, from relief. I kept thinking, how is he this okay? I was so worried about you. "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just buy me dinner. Somewhere expensive. I've earned it." She had. I bought her the best dinner I have ever purchased, and she deserved every course. And Rachel, I drove to Cincinnati, sat across from my sister at her kitchen table, with her 2 kids doing homework in the next room, and told her everything. She listened, and then she said, "So I drove 4 hours for a fake broke brother." "Yes, and sent 12 care packages, 13 actually." She pointed at me. "You owe me 13 dinners." "I'll make it 14. She laughed so hard she had to hold the table. And then, quietly, "James, I'm glad you know now. Who's real?" "Me too," I said. "Me too. 2 years. Completely documented. Here is what I know now, that I did not know before. Wealth does not reveal who loves you. The removal of wealth does. The people who stayed were not the loudest, not the most charming, not the most impressive. They were the ones who showed up on ordinary Tuesdays, with groceries, with phone calls, with 4-hour drives, with nothing to gain. The people who left were not evil. Most of them were simply conditional. They had built a relationship with my circumstances and mistaken it for a relationship with me. That is not villainy. That is just a very common human mistake. But it is a mistake that I am no longer willing to accommodate. Uncle Gerald paid back the loan, but he lost something he will never get back, which is my respect. And without my respect, the money is the only thing he ever had from me, which means he never really had anything at all. Chris's design business, with my investment, launched properly 8 months ago. It is doing beautifully. Priya is still my closest friend. She still checks in every 2 weeks. Now I check in too. Rachel got her 14 dinners. She picked the restaurants. Every single one was reasonably priced. Because that is Rachel. Even when someone else is paying, she doesn't take more than she needs. That is the rarest quality I have ever encountered in a human being. And Nina is sitting in the next room right now, studying for her nursing boards. She doesn't know I can hear her muttering drug names under her breath. She will pass those boards. Because Nina does not stop until things are done correctly. She is the most real person in my life. And she found me when I had nothing to offer, except exactly who I am. If you are listening to this, and you have ever wondered who in your life is actually there, I am not suggesting you do what I did. It is not a small thing to carry for 2 years. There were nights I questioned everything. Nights the loneliness of the experiment felt indistinguishable from real loneliness. Nights I almost called Marcus and told him the truth, just to have my old life back, even knowing what I now knew about what that life actually was. But I didn't, because the question I had asked myself, who would still be here if I lost everything, deserved a real answer. And now I have it, written in a notebook. Every name, every date, every choice, for people, out of everyone, 4, and those 4 are worth more to me than every dinner at every expensive restaurant, with every person who needed my success to justify my company. I am telling you this story today because I think many of you are surrounded by people and quietly, secretly wondering the same thing I was wondering. You do not need an experiment to find your answer. Pay attention. Who calls when there is nothing to gain? Who shows up on the ordinary days? Who asks about you and not about your circumstances? Those people are your real ones. Hold them. Everything else is just a very convincing performance. And performances, eventually, always end.